Welcome everyone to Fireside Chats, Scaling Your Cleantech Startup, How to Optimize HR and Benefits for Success. I am Nisha Sridhar, Marketing and Events Manager here at Foresight. It's really great to see you all here today. It's with gratitude and respect that we acknowledge the lands on which Foresight operates are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And for myself, I'm speaking to you from Calgary, which is within the Treaty 7 territory. These are the traditional lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Giinai, and Piikani First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nation. Here is the agenda for the day. We have an experienced panel here. We will have panel introductions and a moderated Q&A. Please use the Q&A option to post your questions. Before we start, I want to say a few words about Foresight. Foresight is Canada's clean tech accelerator, and our goal is to make Canada the first G7 country to reach net zero. We work tirelessly to position Canada as a global leader in clean tech technology. We bring together clean tech innovators, industry partners, investors, government, and academia to address today's most urgent climate issues and support a global transition to a green economy. Here is our panel: Catherine Brownlee, Robert Pound, Angel Valerio, and our moderator, James Shapea, who's also an EIR at Foresight Canada. Let's start with Catherine Brownlee for a brief introduction.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. So I've been in HR, but more specifically recruitment, since 1998. I've absolutely loved it. I still love it. People ask me why I'm still doing it, and it's truly because it's my passion. And I just love putting great people together with great organizations. I also am a Rotarian. I have been for 20 years, was with Rotary Club of Calgary downtown, moved over to Stampede about 6 months ago. And it's a very active organization for great networking and serving our community.
Thank you, Catherine. Over to Robert.
Good morning. Robert Pound, yes. I'm from Health Risk Services. We are a benefits consultancy and third-party administrator. And really what we focus in on is really gaining more control over your benefits. This day and age, what we're finding is more and more things are changing so quickly. And so our focus on is providing organizations, startups especially, with the tools to be able to provide the benefits and the support for their employees as well as their families, and really just approach it in this way.
Thank you, Robert. Over to Angel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angel Valerio. I work for Clear Renewables with the operations team. Currently at Clear, I am accountable for the oversight and management of the operations here, which include human resources and all the finance and back end of these operations. And I have been invited to this conversation because I have been doing this work for the last 10 years of my life, fortunately collaborating with small enterprises and supporting them transitioning from these early stages to having more robust and solid operations that can sustain their growth. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to share with Catherine, Robert, and James, and hopefully we can get some good ideas flowing today.
And over to James Shapea for an introduction and to moderate the session.
Thank you, Nisha. Welcome to all our guests. Thank you so much for joining us. As many of you know, my background actually isn't in the HR space. It's in the capital space. So actually, I am in the HR space because, in my view, the most important thing, and everybody's heard me scream about this, it's like the CEO's got three things to do. It's set the direction for the company, put the right asses in the right seats, and make sure you don't run out of money. So it's about capital. Everything what we're doing is about access to capital, and that's intellectual capital and financial capital. Financial capital, the only point of the financial capital is to get us the intellectual capital that allows us to execute on the plan that we're actually laid out. So this is absolutely is the most important area for CEOs to be able to figure out, because they need to get the right people. And this is why today was a session that we really put our minds to, because it's absolutely the most critical. So thank you for joining us. And what we're going to do today is for our participants, if you've got questions for anybody, please utilize the Q&A on the screen, and you can see it there. It's easier for us to actually respond directly or raise it for everybody else as well. There is chat there, but our preference is if you could use Q&A. So with that in mind, I'd like us to switch over and start. I think we can remove the this screen. And let's get into a bit of a discussion, because this is, as far as I'm concerned, how do you identify, find, get access to, support, retain the people that you need for execution on your plans? Catherine, you actually are responsible for helping the CEOs find these people. The world has changed. COVID has changed how we find these, where they're located. And I'd like to get your thoughts on how the world has changed in this area. What are some of the things that you're seeing? What do you see as risks to what's going on, or opportunities for the CEOs?
Well, okay, so that question answer could be a whole day. That
Yes,
is a very big one. I'll just do quick high level, and really what's on the scene immediately today is the after effect of the lockdown. And because during the lockdown, everybody was truly locked down and in their home working from work, well, at least except for some organizations that were more the critical services, but most of them were working from home. So coming out of that, and as most of you know, it takes 90 days to create a new habit. And after 2.5 years, you don't have a habit, you have a lifestyle. And it's interesting coming out of that, the ones that did not like working at home at all. And as they start to search for an organization that will meet their needs in either a hybrid way or a full-time back to work way, it's really curious, because even from the candidate's perspective, they're not even sure. I think I'm just going to say, maybe they forget it's been so long, that it's been, a long time since they felt how it feels to be full time. So maybe they mistakenly think, I just want to get back to full time. But then they start seeing some of their other friends and colleagues that are going, I really like this hybrid opportunity where it's only 2 days a week. So the fallout from all of these varieties of opportunities in terms of how the world of work can look is not done. It's really just at the very beginning, and CEOs have a nightmare with having to deal with it. Fortunately, as a small startup or a scale up, there's an opportunity to create something that works well for what the CEO believes is the culture that they want to create, and develop that team out from there. So setting boundaries right from the very beginning. Maybe there's not a lot of flexibility. Maybe it's a hybrid, but it's the same for everyone. And as you build and scale your team, it's the same. Where I'm finding a lot of difficulty is where these CEOs are trying to manage, okay, now I've got a family that has 3 young kids. They want to stay at home, but yet I've got another colleague down the hallway that wants to be in full time, and the variety is way too wide. So fortunately, I'm hoping that a lot of the people on the call are still a small team, and you can create something right from the very beginning that will only attract the people and employees that will fit into that initial need. All the other questions are a much bigger answer.
Angel, from your side, you're obviously you're sitting in office. How has your organization dealt with this?
Yeah, thanks, James. And I absolutely agree with what Catherine is saying. I think this new dynamics between teams is evolving. Fortunately for us, the company since very early has been having operations in different entities like the UK and Brazil. So this problem of having a remote operation has come to our minds very early in the process. So as Catherine mentioned, one of the 3 most important decisions I think we made was first to have a clear set of rules of expectations about this engagement. We were able to invest in technology. So we have different means in which we try to create certain space of collaboration with the team. And of course, the last one is to invest in the human side of the equation. So we try to always humanize as much as we can the engagements we have, even if remote. So we try to always start with an icebreaker where folks can share how their day is going, any special plans for the future, and so forth. So at this time, considering everything, I think a lot of businesses like Clear in this moment, or other businesses around, are having this challenge of deciding if they make any mandates on the way they collaborate, or if they are more flexible on it. One of the pieces of advice, of course, I mean, there's no simple solution here. As Catherine mentioned, we can spend the whole day discussing this. But one of the most valuable pieces of advice I've heard in the past is always to chat with, I mean, if you have the opportunity to talk to your team, have a very open, frank communication. There's people who love to be in the office. I am one of those. I have 2 young children, and working from home is just a nightmare for me. But it doesn't mean that my needs are the needs of everyone else in my team. So there's people who is very effective working remotely, and I think having this clear and open conversation on what is working or not for each one of us is the very valuable first step for any organization.
Thanks, Sergio. Yeah, I could see from your guys' perspective that it creates a whole new dynamic of how you communicate, what tools you use to communicate. How do you make sure that those communications are actually taking place? I know for some, they feel if they're not in, they don't actually know what's going on. But now we're moving, and I agree with you, Catherine, that it's no longer, we had a habit. The habit was we always came in. The habit got destroyed. And now we're back to trying to figure out collectively, what is it going to look like in the future? We're not going back to the way it was. We're not, and whichever way it was we had in the past. So we're creating this new one. But Robert, how do you see organizations utilizing establishing strategies, establishing tools to enable them to attract? Because now you've got this complexity of people that they're no longer just in my location. That location may be global. That location may be who knows where it is. So establishing some strategies for managing that and actually attracting them and retaining them, because there's this new dynamic taking place even as to what is used as far as benefits and so forth. Like it's no simple matter. It's no longer, well, I'm just in Canada, so here's my benefits package.
No, you're right about that, James, and it to the point where the remote does create some opportunities, but the challenges you're speaking about, specifically culture, it's very, very hard to or challenging, I should say, to really to have a culture that speaks to everyone, with everyone having these competing priorities, with everyone working remotely, and so it's really on businesses these days to really make sure that the communication and education portion is really forefront. I always say that when it comes to compensation and benefits, those are really some of the most tangible aspects of a business that employees and basically founders and owners can showcase as part of what the culture is, what they value, in terms of what they put their dollars towards. And so it becomes more and more challenging as we continue to move forward in this ever-changing world where the remote is not going away. If anything, we're seeing more and more that organizations and people are putting their flag in the ground and saying, no, that's it. We're going to have this. This is going to be part of the way we work. And so I think really it comes down to making sure that the table stakes are there, that you do have a competitive wage and benefits in place. And then it really comes down to having those conversations with your employees and understanding that there are competing priorities, there are different demographics, and you need to understand that. And then really just continue to educate them on how to use some of those benefits and the tools that you can give your people across Canada, across the world, because as we know that the world has gotten very smaller, as much as the technology has really allowed us to do that.
Okay. Catherine, so your job is to help the CEOs and the teams find these people. So now the world has changed where you're now looking on potentially a global basis, even for early stage companies, because these people may exist in different places. What are some of the recommendations that you've seen work, and where are the pitfalls as far as when you start doing this selection process? It's a lot harder if you just can't sit across from them and do what you've done in the past as far as this. Will there be a fit? How do you assess those fits? What have you seen work, and what have you seen really not work in the selection
Thank
identification
you.
process?
First of all, I love the world opportunity. I think I've always wanted to be able to work from anywhere I wanted. I have learned in the last couple of years, and one of our largest clients is Anderson Global, one of the top complex tax lawyers for the globe. And what's really interesting is we brought them in as a advisor to ensure that when our clients, our CEOs, are looking to hire someone in India or US or wherever, that there is an absolute line in the sand as to exactly what that person is going to be doing for the organization. It's important that it's never perceived that, in fact, their exact quote is, "Don't sneeze anywhere else unless you're going to be serious about it." So it's easy to hire someone else from somewhere else in the world, but make sure that you're following the tax laws as you do that. Number one. And then number two is, from a culture perspective, I see where it's working. And from CBI's perspective, we've had to change the way we do things, so which was fine. Now we have candidates right out of the gate. Once they've confirmed that they're interested in the role and the organization, we have them do a list of 12 to 15 questions in their own written form with answers to come back to us. And it's simple answers, but it helps to see a few things: how vulnerable they are, how positive they are about leaving their previous organizations, etc. Again, it's in their own words. So once it's documented, it's documented. And it takes that level of seriousness to another level. So that's what we start with. And then we do a quick little 15-minute Zoom interview that is recorded, so that my client can see me asking the candidate a series of 4 to 5 questions that are, again, revealing, but what's a little bit more about their personality. So by the time the client, who may not ever meet the candidate in person, sees the resume, the answers to the written answers, and the Zoom recording, the rest can be up to them. If they fly them in for the interview, or if they fly to see them, lots of them are just hiring them by Zoom. And then just ensuring that once they're onboarded, that if there's an HR team or whoever that person would be, the soft touch person, to make sure that that person is properly onboarded. There's excellent communication for several weeks. In fact, we go back to that 90-day opportunity to create a new habit. So checking in with them like a Rockefeller day. So every morning you check in with them. What's your plans for the day? Check in at the end of the day. How did it go? How can I help you? So that opportunity to make sure that that person stays connected for a long time, until they are completely cemented in the team that they're going to be working with on a regular basis. And then we also ensure that the CEO is touching base with that new person at least once every month, once every 2 months, depending how big the organization is.
So you're creating a lot more structure.
A lot more structure.
Okay. And Angel, I see you're actually nodding, like, yeah. So thoughts on this? Because I think this is the big challenge, is you don't actually just get to go have a coffee anymore. And so that informal discussions where you can really find out what's going on with the team. I know one CEO that I talked to, and when COVID happened, the observation was, I no longer know what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, because you're filtered, like the stuff has been filtered out, where you're told what they may want you to hear. But Angel, thoughts, please.
Yeah, no, it's a great conversation here, and this is something that in the tech industry we're living day to day. I mean, it's not mystery for anyone that the last 2 years for talent acquisition, the tech industry has been a roller coaster. We started with the Great Resignation, and then all this madness that is happening in the last couple of months with all this uncertainty about people getting resigned, offers at the door. So for startups like the ones that maybe tech startups like the ones that maybe are joining us today, and of course Clear as well, it has been always a challenge to keep up with all these variable environment that we're living with talent acquisition and how to compete with talent considering remote conditions. I mean, before, one of the major assets of any startup is culture. So emphasizing the culture of the startup and inviting the person to have a beer in the office and then see how this like very close-knit team is operating, and seeing that just walking 20 steps and they can talk to the CEO and the CTO, and real impact can be produced from their desk, was something that it was easy to advertise and easy to sell to these new candidates. Now in these remote conditions in which we're not just competing against the local industry, but we're also competing against the employees of record, which basically can hire anyone, anywhere, for any organization in the world, it becomes always a challenge. But something that I believe we have been successful with is, as Catherine mentioned, is implementing these methodologies and these clear onboarding processes and screening processes in which everyone is involved. So it's very important for us to showcase again our culture. And the best way to showcase the culture is that as part of this selection process, you have the team who's going to be the colleagues of this person being part of the interview. And they are going to be able to not just ask technical questions, but also more familiar questions about the day-to-day and the way that people interact with each other. So again, for me, it's having these methodologies in place, having this structure, having this technology. I know that this call is through Zoom. Zoom is fantastic, but there are other tools that can provide this closer communication with colleagues. I mean, Slack is something that I use and I love for the technology, what the technology can allow in communication. And yeah, being flexible, offer, as Robert mentioned, good compensation packages, and during this interview process, try to be as human as possible, even when remote.
I'm going to dive a little even deeper into that, Robert. So this new, and it's not really new because we've been doing this now for long enough that we should know that, unmute your mute button when you're talking, which we still do every day. How do you actually look at this? Creates mental health challenges with respect to our teams, right? And I actually know one team never went remote because one of their team could actually not handle it. So throughout COVID, they elected to stay in office because of a mental health issue of one person. I give them total credit for doing this, where they're being aware. So you guys are talking about culture. Well, that culture comes from it comes from the top and saying, this is how we are going to behave. This is the accepted practices. This is that. And so, Robert, what are some of those things that you're seeing companies do with respect to maybe HR practices, packages? Do we now see, like, there's a question we've seen about, is it common to actually have healthcare packages, and included in that, an element of this counseling and so forth? What are you seeing in what's the norm, and then how do you manage this across jurisdictions where you have people located? Like, I have somebody to work with in Romania. I don't actually know what what's the requirements over there. Somebody hopefully does, but how do you deal with that?
I mean, yeah, I think that really is the central issue that all of this change in the last 3 years has shown us. And I think that these aren't new issues. I just think what's happened in the last 3 years has accelerated what we were already going down in a lot of respects. And so, 3 years ago, height of the pandemic, the conversations we were having with our clients was not really access to, a chiropractor or dentist. It was really about, I'm managing, a number of staff, and they are coming to me, and they are really struggling. And can you assist me with ways, tools, things you can give me to really, be effective to allow my employees to get the help they need? And so that really became priority one for us. And so we aligned ourselves with the Canadian Mental Health Association then, and we started to work with some practitioners to work with our clients. And we've implemented a number of programs and really make it standard as part of our plans. And what it is really an employee family assistance plan. And so we add these into all of our plans, and it really is there's a number of organizations out there. What it is it allows organizations to have access to practitioners, therapists on the spot. It's when your employees are in crisis that you're able to give your employees contact to speak to a therapist on the spot when they're dealing with it. The challenge we found is as businesses grow, as businesses start, all of the focus is on that growth, and that's great. But what ends up happening is all of a sudden you have someone going to a manager role, and they're managing people, and all of a sudden they're having to deal with people, and so more and more we are training our managers, we are training our owners on how to have those critical conversations. The data is out there that if you can effectively deal with your employees and give them the support they need when they come to you, when they are vulnerable enough to come to you and ask for that support, the data is very, very strong that if you can do that effectively, the instances of disability, the instances of absenteeism and presenteeism, they go down significantly. The associated costs of when you do have an employee that goes on disability, and ultimately, if they do leave the company, the associated costs that a startup has, or even just really any organization, is significant. I'm hearing numbers of 9 months worth of salary is basically lost with that transition to replace that employee. So I really see the employee family assistance plan is really the preventative measure that every organization can take to really mitigate any of those risks.
Are you seeing that? I just want to go one step further on that. There's historically we've seen benefit packages that whether it's we talk about using ESOPs, but are you seeing, because of what's going on with these changes, that how organizations look at benefits has actually had to change in that?
So 100%. So in terms of not only what we're offering, sort of standardized benefits, that is changing. More and more, we are experiencing that organizations want to have more personalized benefits for their employees. The employees want to be able to choose what's most meaningful towards them, and so we are structuring our packages and having conversations with leaders around how can we build it so it's personalized without breaking the bank for the organization, because there is a cost, and trying to create that sustainability. So that isn't going to go away. If anything, we are going to find more and more as we're dealing with workforces that are divergent demographics with different needs. We just continue to see that taking shape. Yeah.
Angela, you were nodding, like from your organization's perspective, like are these benefits absolutely critical to your ability to hire and retain people?
Yeah, I think right now in the landscape that we're living in, I agree with what Robert is saying. I think it's important for any organization to make an effort to go above and beyond with benefits. Of course, never benefits are going to be the same from one organization to another. And what it can be considered a very comprehensive package for one organization can be at most mediocre for another. But the most important part is this constant review process. In my opinion, I think it's important that this is front and center for the CEO and all the C-suite, that as part of their executive meetings, discussing compensation package, discussing benefits, is part of the continuous review of the business, because they change a lot, right? And if you go from one, even in Canada, if you hire someone in Ontario or hire someone in BC, most likely compensation packages are going to look somewhat different because legislations and regulations are different, let alone hiring from someone from the other side of the world where the whole law is completely different. So in this perspective, James, I believe that investing in your team, investing in retention is a very good investment. As Robert mentioned, if someone leaves from a critical role, the backfill of that position may be really costly for an organization that is maintaining momentum in this economy. And certainly, if I can provide a piece of advice, and I shouldn't provide a piece of advice, but is always seek professional advice on benefit and compensation package integration, because it's always a good idea to have someone who is living, breathing, living this day to day, so they can give you the best advice on where to put these restricted resources and maximize the outcome.
Well, they're living it every single day, so they get to see what standards are and how it's evolving. Catherine, we've heard you and others talking about culture, and critically, culture is, a lot of people don't understand it, but it is a living, breathing thing. It is part of this organization. It is, and obviously it comes from the top, but now you've got, I'm curious to see how you work to us. I know there was question, somebody asked you for the question list that you have, so hopefully you can provide that to everybody. But the part that I'm interested in is, how do you make those cultural assessments? How do you figure that part out? Is it just part of the questioning? Is it such open-ended questions? And I'd be interested to hear where you've seen this really go wrong and why it fell off the rails. Because what I like to say for a lot of the ones is, let's not repeat the same bad mistakes. So what are they to try and avoid it? And this is an area that is, when you're remote, it's very hard to establish that cultural expectation. So your thoughts on this would be appreciated.
Absolutely. And I think there's two pieces to that. So some CEOs are just natural relationship builders. They understand what it takes to really hear someone out, really encourage the team, whether they're remote or not. When we say it comes from the top, I think that's true the majority of time, but I'll also give an example that we're all aware of. We've been in organizations where there was one person that was maybe a sales assistant or whatever inside the organization somewhere that was an absolute cancer. And unfortunately, it affected everyone. And where it went wrong is the CEO didn't fire fast enough. So the loss of good talent as a result of that one cancer cell was brutal. And we've seen that over and over and over again. So I think where it does land on the CEO's desk is to also be a great relationship builder. And if you don't know how to do that, get people around you that know how, so that you can learn, because it's a learned behavior. It's not something that is innate in most people. It is something that you watch, you learn, that works, that doesn't. And especially, everybody is so different on your team. We also have ways of approaching different people. There's actually a couple of really great books. I'm sure you've all heard The Languages of Love, 5 Languages of Love. There's 5 languages in the boardroom and 5 languages with workplace. And it's simple reading, easy peasy, but man, it's ABCs on how to approach each person in your organization with what they need to hear. It's not necessarily what the CEO or the HR person is trying to direct. It's really, what does that employee need? And everybody's very different. So how to learn that, and then go back to the fire fast. When you've made a mistake and you see, or you thought you had a really great candidate and now they're 6 months in and it's a cancer, fire them fast and clean up the team, or you're going to lose others.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. Whenever there's a real problem in the organization, because there's so much opportunity for people to leave, they just go, and you lose the wrong ones in that process. Just a little dive in a little bit more on as far as assessing how an individual fits with the culture that you've got. Are there any tricks or that you can give to our audience as far as when you're talking over Zoom? Like, it's very hard to sit down and find out. I know there's lots of tricks that you can use when you're in person to assess whether it's at a meal, like you can see how they deal with different people. But when you're doing this, it makes it even exceptionally difficult to assess those people. Thoughts on assessing cultural fit from when you're doing it this way, if you can't meet them?
Is this question directed at me, James?
Yes, please.
Okay, very good.
Because you have to talk to all these people and make those judgments because you're recommending to somebody. So how do you do that? How do you see the fit?
Great question. And we watch from the very, very beginning. If they've reached out to my colleague who is on the front line and there's any disrespect at all, I'm notified. So they think that they're actually getting through the process, and we will go put them through, because sometimes our client will ask for this person. Let's say it's a candidate that's been asked to come through the process. So we put them through the whole process. But we've noticed in the written communication that there's a lack of respect for the colleagues that work for me. So when that happens, I'm BCC'd on a response, and I'm aware that there's something that is about this person that I need to take a look at. Then when it comes to me and it's my turn to interview them, I'm very forward with many questions that are called behavior description questions. You can look it up on the internet. There's many different styles. I like this one because after they answer one initial question that is very broad and wide, it's got a series of another 5 to 10 questions that are a follow-up to that. So I'm looking for vulnerabilities, truth. Do they have an ability to take something that was a terrible situation and turn around it into a positive, or do they blame someone? So all these sorts of things I'm looking for that are never actual words that can be put into writing. So then I phone my client and say, these are my observations, and this is what I think about this person. They're not going to fit in your culture.
See, that's fantastic, because one approach that I have seen is very few people can make the hire take place, but anybody can kill it. And that's where any of those communications and I think that's part of setting up your organization for those, recognizing what you're doing. So, they walk in the door, the first person they meet, are they rude to? How do they are dealing with? And there was a lot of that observation going on, but it's that, how do we make sure we do this and we spend the time to actually, Angel, are you seeing it's taking longer? Is it harder to hire? Because on the same vein, you're trying to assess not just the technical capabilities, but this cultural fit. And how do you manage that?
Yeah, that's always a challenge to manage the pressures of the business, because as any other startup, when a hiring decision happens, it is necessary for yesterday. So everyone is putting all the efforts to have the hiring done. But something that we have learned, and I think this is a lesson that is important for any other startup, is it is important to take the time of the process and to make sure that you feel comfortable with the outcomes of the process, and you can subscribe and the team can subscribe to the hiring and not rushing it, because mistakes are costly in this environment, and more when you have very restricted resources. So competing for talent and making sure that the hiring happens in a pace, it's more an art than a science, I would say, because it is the result of the alignment with the culture of the business. So if we have certain values which are very well established in the business and everyone subscribes to them, and if those values can be front and center whenever the hiring process happens, it is somewhat simple for the hiring team to disqualify folks who are not aligned to those values. To Catherine's point, for example, in the case of communication, if communication is one of the values of the business, and it is evident that communication is purposely a challenge for the candidate, then it is a straightforward decision to move with someone who has more alignment to these values. So if we as a business can invest in constantly aligning internally and our teams with the values of the business, when there's the time to do this process of hiring and attracting new talent, one can cut a lot of effort and time by screening more efficiently folks who are aligned to the needs and also to the values of the business. So from my perspective, the times when we have been very successful attracting talent and competing talent against larger organizations has been when we have our values front and center in our hiring process, and we find these candidates who are not just in love about the mission that we have, but also the mechanisms to achieve this vision, which is the values of the business.
So just on that, are you seeing, just continue on with Angel, are you seeing a change in how who is on the hiring team? And Catherine too is on this, like, as far as that hiring team goes, like, I know one of my prior stops on my career, every partner spent on average 20 hours per week in the hiring process. So you think about that, that's their recognized commitment that they were putting on as how important this is to the organization. Are you seeing that within your organization, and Catherine, are you seeing in other organizations where the hiring team has actually been expanded, or has it kind of stayed the same in to make these judgments and these decisions?
Me first, or go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think you have a solid point there, James, and it is it has been a cultural shift. From my lifetime doing this work, I come from the brick and mortar manufacturing business, right? Having these pieces of machinery, roll it, and 25,000 pounds of steel being rolled, and hiring for those type of positions working there, all the way going to software where you hire for the capacity of this person to create a community that can develop this new exciting product. What I can see over the years is that for good, we are shifting from the initial paradigm that is hiring is a HR function together with senior management, because senior management has to subscribe the final two candidates that are in the hiring process to let's do community, and let's make sure that this is a community decision. And the community is the people who's going to be more involved with the day-to-day with these candidates, and make everyone participate to this process. One may think that this is a costly exercise because now your productivity is going to be going down and margins are going to suffer because folks are going to be investing time in hiring rather than writing lines of code. But in reality, what happened there is that you are creating an initial alignment of the team even before the first day of the person. And therefore, this pushback that could happen in a scenario where these hirings are done in an isolation where this person don't fit the culture of my team are completely away. And you can have junior staff providing their perspective to senior staff. And these conversations are amazing. And I can tell you, in some of those conversations, sometimes we have identified gaps in our processes or in our systems that the candidates raise as part of the conversation, and is valuable not just because of the hiring process, but also makes us a better company and a better organization.
Catherine?
Wide variety. So we've got many longtime clients that I've had for 20 years that for the longest time it would be an HR person, maybe a direct report, and maybe it would just, the name would be passed along to the CEO just as an FYI, to changing completely because of the wide variety of opportunities inside the workplace. Now it's 3 or 4, sometimes an initial screening, sometimes they're doing background checks. Like it's completely different. So yeah, it's a wide variety depending on who it is.
Robert, what are you seeing? Because obviously this, you get to see a lot of different companies in this. And what are you seeing as being effective and not effective as far as those processes?
I mean, it really echoes Catherine's point as well. There's really no consistency. I think inconsistency is the consistency right now. And you know, as I'm sort of have a unique position where I consult. I go into a business and I've got a clear vision of what I need to achieve, or I should better yet say the organization or the principals do, of saying, you know, we need to solve this, or we need to bring you in for really either, you know, to look at our benefits, to give us some guidance and advice. And so they are going through challenges. I can tell you that the talent aspect is number one, is always they are, you know, you either have individuals that are wearing multiple hats and roles because they can't fill those positions. They are going through situations where they're trying to expand their offering because they have been unable to get those individuals. And so now they're revising and looking at, you know, the type of candidates they need to get because they are being unsuccessful with, you know, previous efforts. So it really is a little bit of chaotic out there right now. I mean, I would have to say.
Is anybody utilizing data analytics in this area to try and figure it out, to see, because obviously there's so much changes going on. Are there any trends? Is there a way of looking at it? You can say this has been effective and that's not. And because like we're even seeing things where you'll have employees that and this was news to me, but you just get ghosted. They just stop showing up. And then, you know, how do you stop? Like, obviously that's sending a message that there's a disconnect, there's a problem. How do you look at it from an HR policy and perspective to be able to say, you know, this isn't working, we need to do something different? So how do you analyze what does work for others? Robert.
Yeah, so we approach it more on we look at the trends and patterns of the plan to really get a bead on how the plan's performing. And you can get a snapshot of what's being utilized of the plan overall. So that gives you a sense of you know, what benefits are being utilized, and then if you have the appropriate dollars to put towards them. So if you're seeing a greater utilization of, say, perhaps you know, psychological services, well, then that does help. That does help quite a bit, because all that data allows you to make decisions moving forward. And so, you know, part of the work that we try and do when we work with our clients is really to present that data in a way that allows them to make the appropriate decisions, to move forward on whether they provide more resources or more guidance, or bring in, you know, speakers and some experts on mental health, financial health, you know, some of those resources. It's really the data analytics that, you know, it is rear view looking in a lot of sense, but we try and approach it so that we can make the appropriate decisions, or provide the right guidance, I should say, so our clients can make those appropriate decisions moving forward.
Okay. Catherine, sorry, you were going to say.
Yeah, all I was going to say is talk to Robert because HR, all of my HR friends are saying it's changing so fast. We would need someone like Robert's team to tell us what the analytics actually look like, for sure.
So on that, Angel, what are, and this is for all of you, what are some good resources? So Catherine, you mentioned a book that's actually can be helpful. What are resources that you guys rely on in this and you've seen very helpful? Angel, anything from your perspective?
Yeah, well, there's many things around, and with everything that is open right now, I mean, everyone has access to everything. So, but for me, something that I consult on my day-to-day is Um, from the compensation is always an important aspect from the operations and human resource perspective. So always being competitive on the different regions where one has operations and so forth is important. There are many reports, Mercer report and many others who provide a view on how compensation is evolving across the different regions. I mean, last year it was really interesting reading those reports because considering all the inflation events that we had by the end of the year, the adjustment on salaries was an interesting discussion for sure. And we are using a very powerful tool, in my opinion, called Pay Factors. It is a tool that helps benchmarking by accountabilities, by region, by size of business. And they are expanding this tool now and including also total compensation packages, not just base salary. So it's a good baseline to understand where the organization is sitting compared to peers. And of course, I mean, having the access to experts like Robert or your legal counsel to identify where to put your resources is valuable. And just recently, I mean, if anyone is interested about stock compensation, I found this podcast in Spotify called the Equity Compensation Guidebook. Most of the startups use equity compensation as part of their compensation packages, and I found this podcast very informative and entertaining. If anyone is interested in that area.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine.
I have lots of global thought leaders that are mentors of mine. Some of them know who I am, some don't. And I just learn as much as I possibly can. When I need an expert, there's always someone that I can reach out to.
And you'll post as well, because you're out there with thoughts as well. So I think that's also helpful. Robert, any resources that are absolutely critical to your being able to execute on yours?
Yeah, I would sort of echo some of the things that Angel said. Is we benchmark with all our clients, and that does just a lot of different things. It allows businesses to see where they stack up against their competitors, and it really allows them to see what their competitors are offering. So it allows that. So for a budgetary place, we all know that we all have budgets. That really allows organizations to see where they stack up on those end. And then the other really aspect is really just getting the feedback from your employees. So the mixture of really the benchmarking and the feedback, it allows us to build some plans together that really align with where organizations can move forward and really position themselves so that they're able to keep the talent they have, and then as well as they know that they can go to market and be able to hopefully get those other new shining stars.
Sure. This question is going to be for actually all of you, and Catherine, please start on this. Employee stock option plans. I'm hearing from some current. I think there may be some generational changes, but I'm not sure. I'm interested in all of your guys' thoughts. How important are those ESOPs to the attraction and retention of staff? Is it staying out there? Is it changing? What is it that you're seeing? Are you getting asked about it, Catherine? And thoughts in there?
Certainly asked about it. Not for any of the larger companies, but anybody who is small tech, startup, anybody who wants to get in at the ground level first, definitely wants to have skin in the game, especially if they're an executive level. I think where it starts to be a disconnect is after a few years, and it's more diluted anyway. It's probably not worth the same as it was. So there's less interest. And I also find that it depends on the position. So if they're a 10-year company, there's probably not much available. If there is, it would be very different kind of structure, maybe preferred be something different. And that's not something that retains people. What retains people at that stage, and I think at all stages, is how they're treated, that they feel relevant, they feel purpose and significance in what they do.
Angel?
Yeah, not much to add to what Catherine just said. I think compensation, equity compensation by itself is less attractive than being part of an overall compensation package. And when I say overall compensation package, I also mean the material and immaterial compensation that a person has, which is, for example, freedom to decide where they want to be their office, or freedom to have flexibility with their schedule in common agreement with their managers. So for us, because we're a tech startup, the equity compensation has been an important piece of our overall compensation package. In my experience, I've seen that, at least from my perspective in this current role, it has been a good mechanism for attracting talent that is aligned and wants to take the risk, right, to grow in the organization. So yeah, but certainly, as Catherine mentioned, not single answer here. I think it's a combination of different factors for sure.
For sure. Robert, in your practice, how are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, great points by both of you. I don't have much to add on that. The only thing I would add is more and more as we continue to go down this path, I'm seeing more of a focus on DEI strategies, on really trying to make sure that the place of work is more inclusive, and that organizations, everything they put out, the plans they build, are representative of that. So a lot of work is going around that right now.
Okay. Something that one CEO did that I thought was actually quite interesting, and I'd like your guys' thoughts on tricks to try and attract people, because obviously not everybody's going to know your organization. So one of the things that they did was made sure that they were included in the top 100 places to work. So they're utilizing different tooling mechanisms to create profile for that. Catherine, are you seeing any of that or anything else that helps create that profile for companies?
I think it depends on the level of candidate that they're searching for. If they're looking for an executive, then that is out and rubbing shoulders with the circle of the candidates that they would be interested in taking a look at. So that's more of the high level strategy. But you're right, there's certainly a lot of organizations, the larger ones, that will, in fact, I even know that they will have employees or contractors write up all the things that they need to be able to get in the top 100 employers to work for. So that is very real. But there's people like me and probably many other executives that look at it and go, I already know that you guys are doing that. So that's not necessarily what I'm looking for. And if I'm an executive looking to join any organization, I'm certainly going to take a lot of time to do my own due diligence to ensure that I'm making the right move anyway. So it's all depending on the level of person, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I think I agree with you. Angel?
Yeah, I think there's no magic here, James, and I believe the most effective approach is just to invest the time on the hiring process and make sure that you can connect with the candidates. I have previous colleagues where have been building the building blocks of the talent attraction systems that we have in the company right now, and everything has been just hard work, being very close to the candidate, make sure that we understand the needs of the business, and having this presence there.
Okay, thank you. I think we're coming to our time. I thank you so much. This is absolutely, as we know, it is the most important thing that an organization needs to do. They have to be able to identify, attract, and retain their people. If they can't do that, then there's no ability to execute on their plan. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. I hope our guests can actually reach out to you, hopefully make connections. Robert, you may be having a few phone calls as to, I need some help on how do I deal in this area? Because Angel, you're correct. We don't deal with this day to day. So, and Catherine, I know that we're going to have further discussions about how do I find those people, and because I don't know how to look globally. So the world is actually functioning very differently. So thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. I will turn it back over to Nisha.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody. This was a great session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you to our panel members, too. Please note our next session is on grants, identifying the right opportunities and managing the process on June 13th. Astrid has sent the link in the chat. Thank you and see you next time. Bye, everybody.